All right, so today we are going to dive into some study tips. So this has been a very popular or a highly requested topic from you guys, so I hope you enjoy. Today we're going to talk about the different types of studying techniques that you can utilize today, whether you're still in your BSN or whether you're already embarking on your SRNA journey. And I also want to just say that I was there one day too. I was that student who didn't know how to study, and I thought I knew how to study. I thought I could just read a textbook, absorb the knowledge, and take a test, and that didn't really do anything for me except get B's and C's. And it wasn't until that I was faced with rejection from the College of Nursing in my college career, my freshman year, that I realized that I had to do something different, and what I was doing currently was not working. In fact, I remember spending an exorbitant amount of time trying to read, trying to study my notes without getting anything other than a C and B. And it just felt frustrating that I watched everyone else around me do that and get A's, while when I attempted to do that, I only got C's and B's. So I took it upon myself to take a full course load in the summer, that college year, my freshman year, going into my sophomore year in college. And at the time it was 2005, I just Googled study techniques and I tried them all. I learned a lot by doing that. And I also learned that I was not studying effectively for me. And I also kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there was numerous ways to study, and I was only taking advantage of one little small piece of that. And so that's what I want to share with you guys today, that the more you take advantage of the various techniques, the better you're going to get at studying. Before we jump in, I'm going to go ahead and set out some reminders here for you guys. Coming up here on March 14th at 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., we have the 7-panel SRNA Q&A session. I'm very excited about this. I have hand-selected SRNAs from various stages throughout the journey. Some are just starting as SRNAs. Some are getting ready to graduate as an SRNA. I have also picked SRNAs with a diverse background. Some of them, CRNAs, their second career. Some of them have kids. And so again, I wanted to kind of pick a variety of students for you guys to talk to and answer questions that will give you a well-rounded view of what their experience has been like. So I really hope you take advantage of this. And also just to let you guys know that all the proceeds from this event are going towards an SRNA scholarship foundation called Pay It Forward CRNA, and as well as a participation scholarship for these students. So if you are a CRNA School Prep Academy student, this is at no additional charge to you. If you want to attend this session with us on March 14th and you're not a CRNA School Prep Academy student, you are welcome to join us and we hope to see you there. It's going to cost just $35, and that's for 2 hours of an excellent Q&A session. The way we're going to format that is we're going to have you pre-submit your questions ahead of time. We're going to spend the first hour having every SRNA ask those similar questions so you can kind of get a variety of answers to the same question. And then the last hour of the Q&A is going to be open Q&A for you to take advantage of being there live with us. If you can't make that day, I do record all these sessions and we'll send out the replay link. So even if you can't make it, if you submit your question ahead of time, you're going to get your question answered. So I hope to see you there. And let's go ahead and get into some study tips. Okay, so one of the first things I want to dive into is auditory learning and your style of learning, I should say. So between auditory, visual, reading and writing, and kinesthetic, which is kind of doing it physically, doing the motions, like hands-on learning, there's various styles of learning. And so we're going to cover auditory first. That's probably, I would say, this day and age with all the podcasts out there, YouTube channels, and all the recorded lectures now, that's probably one of the most common ways students now tend to learn. And this is great. It's definitely a great way to learn. I actually bought a little handheld recorder back in the day and took it to class with me. But nowadays, again, with everything being so online and virtual, most professors are recording their lectures anyways and posting it online for you. But if you don't have access to that, I do encourage you to go out and buy a little tiny handheld recorder. Sit close to the front of the classroom, don't be afraid, no one bites, and record your lectures, because this will be invaluable to you as you review the lectures later when you're going back over your notes. Because I can't tell you time and time again when I would do this and re-listen to my lectures, how much you miss the first time in your actual attending the class, whether it's because you're distracted or you're busy writing notes on what they just said and miss the next topic, whatever it may be. I promise you, if you re-listen to your lectures, you will pick up on new information that you missed the first time around. So that's number one. I want you to record your lectures. I want you to even record yourself speaking your own notes. So auditory, again, can be used in multiple ways. It's not just about listening to podcasts or listening to your lecture. It's about using your ears as one sensory mechanism to learn, along with other mechanisms like writing things down. So as you're listening, you want to be taking notes. That's combining two different techniques. That's hands-on skills along with auditory. And so I think the most important thing I gathered when I was learning how to study was you need to combine more than one method to actually have an effective study session. And so again, auditory is great, but make sure you're utilizing taking notes at the same time. Now I get that's not always possible if you're in the car or if you're busy doing something else. Listening and re-listening to lectures is still better than not doing it at all. So if that's the only thing you can do, then by all means, listen and learn. But if you can take the time to actually sit down and take notes while you're listening, that would probably benefit you more. Okay, so that's one technique. The next one is visual learning. Okay, so for visual learning, this may seem like common sense, but it's looking at graphs, looking at charts that you make, and actually not just looking at them, but you actually, again, want to be practicing writing these down. You want to be practicing drawing them out. So again, you're combining the hands-on technique with the visual aspect of learning. This can be for anything that you're color coding. I am a big fan of highlighters. Back when I used to study, when I did not know how to study, I would use yellow for everything. I would highlight everything in yellow and thought that would help me remember it. But that was not the case. When I started mixing up my colors, maybe I would highlight the vast majority in yellow. And then for when I got to, like, say, a topic that I know they hit in the notes or in lecture, I would then alternate to a different color like orange. And I would highlight that particular topic in orange because I knew it was an important topic that they hit on in class. And then I would go back to my yellow or, and highlight as I go. Then when I hit the next important topic that I knew I needed to know it for the test or something like that, I would highlight it in blue. So I would alternate colors. I kind of had like rainbow pages in my books and in my notes. But what this did was when I was taking a test, I may not know the answer, but I could remember that I did read about it, and whatever I read about it was in orange. And it would kind of help me or help jog my memory, like, okay, what was in orange? What did I highlight in orange? What did I highlight in pink? And I don't have a photogenic memory by any means, but this was the closest I got to photogenic memory, was remembering the color and what was in that color, whether it be a term, a certain word, a concept, whatever it may be. So take advantage of that, try it out, see if it works. I have had students who tell me that's why they like colored pens. I never utilize, to me, that just takes too much back and forth to change pens all the time. I already get a writer's cramp as it is. But if that works for you, try writing in different colored pens, maybe write have a variety of pens in front of you so you can kind of keep going back and forth as you're taking notes. I also know that most students these days use some type of iPad, whether it be an iPad Pro or whatever I think even HPs, I know HPs can do it as well. They have like little tablets for those, and there's Notion and Notability. Notion is for HPs and Notability is for Macs, and you can take notes that way. And I do know for at least the MacBook, there's a cover you can get that allows it to feel like paper. So it doesn't matter whether you're physically using real paper or you're using your iPad like paper. Handwriting notes is one of the best ways to memorize what you're actually hearing and learning visually. So whether you're hearing it, whether you're reading it, by actually physically writing it down at the same time, you're going to help jog your memory better. So it's not just reading, it's reading and taking notes. It's not just hearing, it's hearing and taking notes. So I hope you guys are picking up on the fact that the best study techniques are usually a couple different methods combined. So that's, again, an example of visual learning and taking advantage of using different colors when you highlight things, or drawing out graphs, and practicing. Repetition's key. With anything learning, repetition is key. You can't expect it to read something once or hear something once and know it well. You really have to be utilizing and multitasking essentially by re-listening and rereading things. One of the things I used to do as well is I used to read my textbook or my notes, and I would retake the notes. And then I would actually physically speak it out into my recorder and study my study guide into my recorder. Then I would take that recorder and I would plug in my earbuds and I would walk to class listening to those notes I recorded myself saying. And it was the act of physically saying my notes out loud that actually helped jog my memory when I was trying to recall that information from my test. So again, it's two different techniques combined. It's the physical task of talking and the auditory portion. And so again, that's combining two different techniques into one. And so that can be used again in any different method that you see fit. I also used to go take my notes to the gym. So I would have my PowerPoint presentation printed out. I would take notes on that. Then I would take that PowerPoint presentation to the gym. And I did have to play around with types of activities I could do at the gym, but I finally found an arc trainer, which is kind of like an elliptical, but it's more smooth and it's not as bouncy as a elliptical. I would take and sit my notes on that arc trainer, and I would reread them as I listened to whatever music I wanted to. And I didn't re-listen to my notes. I would actually listen to music I enjoyed listening to. And that did a couple things. It actually got me energized and motivated and excited and awake, essentially. And that was the same thing that the exercise was doing for me. It was getting me awake. It was keeping me engaged and paying attention to what I was doing, versus just sitting in a boring chair in a dim room and trying to read your notes and, dozing off and daydreaming about something else you'd rather be doing. The activity and physical activity of going to the gym and actually being physically active while I was trying to learn helped me retain my information so much better. And that's actually 90% of what I thought helped me the most when I actually was in my undergrad years and started getting straight A's for the first time. And not to mention, actually, I was in really good shape by the time I was done with school. So try it out. If you have a treadmill at home, you don't have to run. I mean, sometimes that gets too bouncy, but that's when you can run and maybe listen to your notes if you can't read because it's too bouncy. But if you want to walk on a treadmill or something like that, take your notes and read your notes. Try to combine physical activity with learning. That in itself will kind of help you retain things more. Another technique you can also use is where you kind of are, say, reading a chapter on one topic, and then say something within that topic kind of jogs your memory on something else that you also learned that you think is somewhat related in a way. I encourage you to stop there, go look up that topic that kind of jogged your memory or something that kind of is somewhat related, and look that up right then and there, and then add it to your notes that you're taking on that chapter. Because what this does is it kind of helps build the Christmas tree. You get the base down, and you put up the branches, then you string the lights, then, the ornaments, and then the tinsel. And so when you're studying one thing and you have another topic that's somewhat related, you can actually build upon that knowledge and connect two different pieces together. That, let's just say you get a test question that you don't know, but this other thing is related to this thing. It'll be how you can kind of jog your memory on a topic you're not as familiar with by kind of relating two different somewhat similar topics together. And it's kind of, pathophysiology, pharmacology, a lot of that plays together. And so again, connecting the dots a little bit will help you recall information that maybe is a little more abstract. So I encourage you to do that. Now, don't go on these long tangents of studying a particular topic and go off on a total sideball where you're totally off topic and you're spending hours studying something that you weren't intending on studying. I mean, study what you need to study and add to it for short increments at time when you have little other pieces of information that you can add to it, but don't spend more than a half hour doing that. Don't go completely off topic to study something else while you're trying to get one particular thing done. So you do have to be careful with that you're not wasting the time you have, but you're necessarily just quickly trying to find something and then add to it. Okay, so hands-on learning. We all know the hands-on skills, just like riding a bike, it's a muscle memory type thing. But I think people underutilize this when they're reading or writing or talking. And again, What I mean by this is like back to the gym situation. That's your hands-on, you're essentially kind of hands-on learning because you're getting your body active in the process. And it's funny, when you hear things like, for example, I bet you have a song that you can hear from your childhood and you can literally think of what you were doing when you heard that song. I think of Asa Bass and think about jumping on a trampoline in the summer with my sister and some of my neighborhood friends. And I remember even what the temperature was like. I remember what it smelled like. I remember, whether our dog was in the yard or not. I remember everything about that time just because of that song. And so that's exactly how your memory works. You actually relate sensory items to memories. And so when you're studying, you want to try to create the same type of thing. You want to try to bring emotions in. You want to try to relate certain topics to being bad or good, or relating them in a way that can make you recall them later on based on emotion. An example of this, and I say this a lot, so bear with me if you've heard it before, but it's just the easiest thing for me to think of. When I'm studying the pulse oximeter and how that works, and the Beer-Lambert law, and the different wavelengths of, infrared and red light, and the nanometers, and all that stuff, for deoxygenated hemoglobin, it's usually from the red light that's absorbed in the pulse oximeter. So how do you remember that? It's also a wavelength of 669. So again, when I'm trying to remember that, I'm like, well, gosh, that's kind of complex. So I think of red, the devil's bad, so deoxygenated hemoglobin is bad. You don't want deoxygenated hemoglobin. So the devil sees red. I also know that 666 is a sign of the devil. So again, 669 is the wavelength. So if I had to decipher that on a test, I could easily do that because of that simple technique. Same thing with ferrous and ferric. Those are two different states of iron, how your body absorbs and utilizes iron. And so the ferric state is bad. So ferric, ick, sounds like sick. So again, I kind of think ferric is bad, ferrous is good. And so that is what I mean as far as using little techniques like that to really help you. Okay. So other senses you can utilize when you're studying are utilizing the brightness of the room, for example. If you're studying in a very dim lit room and you're already tired, that's you're not going to do effective studying. So brighten up the room, light a candle, get your senses involved, chew on mints, maybe have some coffee, or, you can drink wine or beer, but just make sure you're limiting how much you're drinking. But just something to kind of keep you stimulated, keep you engaged, keep you awake. If you find yourself burning out and getting tired and bored, take a break, because if you force yourself to stay in a situation where you're not engaged, I promise you're not going to gain anything out of it. You really are just wasting your time. And this was a really hard concept for me myself to learn, because I wanted to have these 5-hour study sessions where I could just go. And I was realizing after about 2 hours, I was just not retaining things, and I was struggling. I was getting miserable and unhappy. And so what I would do essentially is I would go take a break and say I go to the gym, and I would actually study, but while I worked out. And so I was reinvigorated. I was awakened by going to the gym and doing that, but I was also still studying. And this was back to when I was studying more likely for boards. I would say I would do this. I would take a gym break and study, then go back to Panera and study some more. Typically, on a weekends as an SRNA, you're going to be spending the vast majority of your day studying. Can you do it all in an 8-hour stretch? No, you're going to have to take breaks and find ways to get creative. Maybe take a break and cook a meal, a healthy meal, but listen to your notes while you do that. Or fold the laundry, but again, listen to your notes. Or get your friends involved, get your roommates involved, get your husband involved, your spouse, your partner, have them quiz you. My husband would routinely quiz me over dinner sometimes. I'd ask him to. I'd also utilize my classmates who we commuted to class. Class is about 2 hours one way. And we did that 4 days a week in the beginning. So it was a lot of driving. So on the way to class, we would all just quiz each other over the study guide or over a topic. We would have, our notes in front of us, and we would just talk about our notes with each other. And that was a great way to study. Now on the way home from class, we would just chit chat, because there's no way we could go to class for 2 hours and study, go to 8 hours worth of class and go home and study for 2 more hours. Like, we usually were burnt out by the time we got back in that car to go home. But these are just examples for you guys, and make sure that you're picking your study partners well. There were definitely some times where me and my girlfriend would get together and study, and it turned into more of like, we got drunk on wine, and it wasn't really an effective study session. It was fun, and sure, we still made time for that intermittently, but we knew it was not going to be called a study session. So make sure you're picking appropriate places to have study sessions. If you know that in someone's house you're going to be too tempted to drink wine and get drunk, go to the library together and try it instead. And just make sure you're staying focused on what you want to get accomplished. But utilizing your classmates, and that's huge. I mean, because they learn topics differently. So when you learn a topic, believe it or not, you're going to be learning it a little bit differently than your classmate. So when you're getting into complicated things like dose efficacy curves, pick your students or your classmates' brains on how do you understand this concept, because chances are they might have a different twist on it than you do. And so you can both help each other out in that way. Let's see what other tips I can give you guys. Those are probably the biggest pointers I can give you to kind of try different things. But ultimately, you need to be utilizing all of these skills in different ways. Some people like flashcards. You know, for me, I think flashcards are too time consuming to actually physically make. And the act of making the flashcard for me doesn't do as much. It just doesn't seem the best use of my time, because I know I can listen to my lectures and take notes much faster than making individual flashcards. But these days you can buy flashcards. People have flashcard sets already on Quizlet. There's games on things like Kahoot. Anki's another one to look up. So, and Quizlet, I think, is one of the most popular ones. But again, utilizing resources like this that are maybe already pre-made. I do know most classes, at least in anesthesia school, had kind of like a class folder on Dropbox, and they would share that folder with everyone who started the program. There'd be PDF books on there. There'd be flashcards, all kinds of information on there for you to utilize. And so look for things like that that will save you time instead of you physically handwriting every single flashcard out, because you really have to be good about time management. You have to make the best use of your time. And if you're spending 3 hours to cover one chapter for flashcards, when you could have spent 3 hours doing 2 or 3 chapters and with reading and taking notes, your time better spent is probably spent reading and taking notes and just making flashcards on one chapter. Because I'll tell you right now, anesthesia school, it's not that it's rocket science. You're not building rocket ships, but it's a ton of information in a short period of time. So that is where I see students get overwhelmed. And I can tell you right now that even straight A students go into anesthesia school and get overwhelmed. They can't keep up. They have a hard time. And I actually think some people who naturally are very gifted and very smart and can maybe read a material and retain it very well, who got through their BSN with straight A's, they can still struggle in anesthesia school because it's information overload, you guys. You have to be good at time management. You have to be, and especially when you combine the stress of clinical on top of it. So I promise you, even if you think you have a solid background in how to study, please take some time to think about these things and at least practice it. Maybe even if you're not in class right now, but a lot of students take like a pathophysiology before school or a chemistry or grad stats. Make sure you're using that time before you actually start the program to practice some different study techniques when maybe you don't have a full course load on board. So make sure you're doing those things. I also want to touch quickly on test strategy. That's another area that I had to make improvements on because, I was reading a test and the first thing I would do is I would read a question and look at all the answers, and then I would either second guess myself or kind of let my brain get the best of me where I'm like reading too far into the questions or maybe not reading into them enough. One thing I have always struggled with is I would say I have probably a mild form of dyslexia where sometimes I omit words or I insert words or I, mix things up, get them backwards even. So I have to be very careful when I read. And so that being said, reading's never been my thing because I'm not good at it. I'm not fast at it. I make mistakes. I have to, if I can do it well, but I have to do it slow. Like I'm not a speed reader. If I speed read, I just don't get the concept as well. So that being said, taking tests has always been a challenge for me because again, if I'm timed or if I'm trying to go too fast, I make mistakes. And same thing with looking at the questions or the answers before you even try to answer the question. Don't do that. Practice reading a test question and knowing the answer before you even look at any of the options. only look at the options after you've come to at least some kind of conclusion to what the answer may be. And what I do is I would read a test question. I would take notes on the side. I would kind of brain dump, especially if it was a hard question. I would read the question. I would brain dump some ideas over off to the side. And then I would look at the potential answers. 9 times out of 10, I'd have the answer pretty obvious right there based on my brain dump. Every now and then I'd get a little confused or it'd be a little tricky. And so I'd have to advance on to the next question. And I would maybe put a little line next to what I thought it would be, but I would go back. Now I get some computerized tests, you can't do this. And keep in mind, boards, you can't do this. You have to pick an answer and move on. So you can't always utilize this technique. But on some, in class tests that I could go back and review my answers after I got through the whole test, I would save some questions that maybe I was a little bit unsure about but thought I knew, and kind of take my best guess, go through the rest of the test. And remember how I said you want to build on your knowledge and relate certain things back to one another? Well, you might get to another question that could literally answer the question that was earlier on in the test. So you get to another question that is somewhat similar or kind of played in together, and you're like, oh, now I know the answer to that question because I know the answer to this question. And that's how that kind of leaving where you are studying to go look up something else ties into that on a test. So try that out, see if it works for you. But that by far has been the best method for me to take a test in a good way, is to try to know the answer before you look at the answers. And obviously don't second guess yourself. You're usually right the first time. Don't go back and change a bunch of your answers. But if you have to, take your best guess and move on. And then if you want to go back to see if anything in the test kind of jog your memory to help you answer that question, that's okay. But if you go back to review that test question and you still don't have anything that kind of helped you jog your memory, leave your first guess alone. I'm sure you can relate, because we've all probably been there where we get a question wrong after we went back and changed it. So it's usually go with your gut on that. All right, so I just threw a lot at you guys. I hope it was helpful, and stay tuned. Next week, we're gonna go over, I did mention some of the apps already, kind of a little teaser, I guess, but I'm gonna go over study resources for you guys, YouTube channels, IG, different apps, websites, all kinds of helpful information and resources and tools for you guys to use as you not only prepare for your interview for anesthesia school, but as your time as an SRNA. So I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.